The good news is that this is actually a pretty simple problem, and it has a pretty simple solution. The problem is that all these changes are coming because when you burn coal, oil, and gas, you release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that's a heat-trapping gas. So you're increasing the amount of heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere, which means you're increasing the temperature of the planet. The solution is to stop burning coal, oil, and gas. That's all we have to do. Simple problem, simple solution. Now, a lot of you laughed at that comment. Well, some of you. Because it sounds simpler than it is, right? Which brings me to my next point. The reason we have not made this shift, or not started making the shift in earnest, is because big coal, big oil, and big gas have been making it their business, quite literally, to make sure that we do not. The fossil fuel industry over the past several decades has been doing everything in their power to confuse this issue and to corrupt our political process so that no progress is made. In the 2009 to 2010 congressional session, they spent $350 million on campaign contributions and lobbying. Now that probably seems like a lot of money, and it should, because it is a lot of money. But put that into context. ExxonMobil traditionally makes about $10 billion in profit per quarter. $10 billion in profit, not revenue, profit per quarter. The entire industry only spends $350 million over 2 years. Imagine how much more they would spend if they really felt that we were going to win and that we would make their business model obsolete. That is what we're up against. We cannot outspend the wealthiest industry in the history of the human race. We cannot outlobby the wealthiest industry in the history of the human race. This fight cannot be about who has more money because we will lose. So this fight has to be about something else. About who has more love and who has more passion, who is willing to sacrifice more to defend the things they love. That is how this fight must be waged, and how this fight must be judged, and how this fight must be won. And this fight must be won. Because none of you want to live in a world where it is lost, and I sure as heck do not. And my niece, who's 3.5 years old, does not deserve to live in that world. So how do we show that love? How do we show that sacrifice and that commitment? There are 3 basic things that we need to do. First, we need to challenge the social license of an industry whose entire profit model depends upon destroying life on Earth as we know it. We need to make it clear that that is not an appropriate way to make profit in today's society. We need to show that good standing institutions like First Parish Church want to have nothing to do with an industry that prioritizes their own short-term profit over the long-term welfare of the human race and of every other species we share this planet with. We need to make sure that universities, churches, synagogues, states, towns, and individuals divest, pull their money out of these deadly energy industries. And I encourage you to start using that term, deadly energy. We have been defining this energy as a dirty energy industry. And I think you all agree this is about a lot more than how dirty or how clean something is. When you burn fossil fuels, when you burn coal, oil, and gas, human beings die. They die from climate change, but they also die from breathing in that pollution, from having their air and their water contaminated. 20,000 Americans die every single year from the air pollution generated from fossil fuel power plants. 20,000 Americans. It's almost 7 9/11s every year from things we're doing to ourselves. Because we choose to use deadly energy when we could use benign energy. We know how to generate electricity without killing people. You tap the sun, you tap the wind, you tap other sources of moving water. You use less energy to begin with, and then the energy you are using, you use a lot more efficiently. That's our challenge. That's what we should have been doing for the past several decades, is diving into how do we do that completely across the board within society. And the reason we have not is because these industries have been actively standing in our way, obstructing progress. And that's the clutch of it. It's not that their industry alone is so deadly, but that they know that it's deadly, and not only do they not turn around in the other direction, but they start charging for it even faster. None of these companies are making anywhere near responsible investments in renewable energy technology. BP for a while was called Beyond Petroleum, and their boss, Tony Hayward, when he came in, he said there are too many people in here who want to change the world instead of make money. And he cleaned out the renewable energy divisions. And they've sold off all of their wind and their solar divisions. And they're back on the business of making money by destroying our planet. That cannot be an acceptable investment any more than you would allow your church or your state to invest in slavery. Billions of lives are hanging in the balance. We need to make sure that is unacceptable. The second thing we need to do is to fight these industries project by project and ally with the frontline communities that have been feeling the blunt of their destructive and deadly energy for decades, if not centuries. It's no coincidence that there is not a coal plant in Concord, Massachusetts. These plants are located in disproportionately low-income communities and communities of color. And they have been bearing the costs of our collective energy consumption. The extraction communities where those things are pulled out of the ground are similarly not here in Concord or in the Hamptons or in Martha's Vineyard, but Native American reservations and in Appalachia. In the communities where there are no other options. We need to work with these communities and support them in their fights. And a lot of those fights are farther away. but there were also some fights closer to home. We still burn coal in Massachusetts. We burn a heck of a lot of natural gas and oil. The International Energy Agency puts out an annual report called the World Energy Outlook. In their 2012 report, and this is, again, a conservative global institution that has in the past been seen as a cheerleader for big oil, big coal, and big gas. And they said that if we want to have a chance of keeping temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius, which is basically what the political consensus suggests we should keep it below, or the political consensus expects we will not be able to keep it below also, by the way. But what scientists think is still too high of a temperature increase, and I think that the 55,000 dead people in Moscow would agree with that. That 2 degrees Celsius is too high. But that in order to keep our temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius, we need to make sure that not a dime of money in any currency is invested in building any new fossil fuel infrastructure anywhere in the world after the year 2017. That we have 4 years to get the entire world to stop building new coal plants, to stop building new natural gas plants, to stop building new oil extraction sites or coal extraction sites or new fracking sites, from building new pipelines, from building new export facilities. Because the amount of carbon that is already expected to be put into the air from the existing facilities we have online, from the existing infrastructure we've already built, from 2012 would get us to 80% of the way to that 2 degrees Celsius if they carry forward to their expected retirement dates. And almost every single plant lasts longer. Every pipeline lasts longer than their expected retirement dates. But that by 2017, if we carry forward all of those existing infrastructure projects to their expected retirement dates, we will have hit 100% of the carbon we are allowed to put up before we cross that threshold. Which means in China and in India and in Indonesia and South Africa and Nigeria, as they are building new plants to try to lift people out of poverty and to provide electricity to those who they don't have it anymore, so to those who do not have it currently, that starting in 2017, neither they nor anyone else can build any fossil fuel facilities if we have a hope of keeping it below that 2 degrees threshold. Which means we here in Massachusetts needed to implement that policy about 10 years ago, if we can actually expect China and India and South Africa to do it the same. The good news is that we can take these fights and we can win them. And if we do this, if we ostracize the fossil fuel industry and revoke their social license through divestment, and if we challenge them project by project and get them to shut down those coal plants, and get them to stop building new gas plants and stop expanding pipelines and building new pipelines and new export facilities, we will build the collective power we need to do the third thing, which is to implement real policy change. And to have our government catch up to governments in other parts of the world that are instituting carbon taxes and implementing caps on their emissions on a national level, and creating strong incentives for renewable energy development, and to get ourselves on the right track to very rapidly transition our economy. We've ostracized industry successfully before with the tobacco industry, which used to be just as generous with their contributions to politicians and just as controlling and just as deceitful as the fossil fuel industry. And everyday Americans rose up and exposed that deceit and organized and made it clear to their politicians that association with a tobacco company would be incredibly harmful to their re-election prospects. That they would not vote for, much less campaign for, someone who is willing to be associated with a product that knowingly killed people. We have a product that knowingly kills people. We need to make that shift rapidly to make it clear that that is not an acceptable form of behavior, as we did with the tobacco industry.